It's Saturday, May 29, 2021. This is the CDA Evening News. Good evening from the Studio 20 newsroom at CDA News headquarters here in Semarang. Good to be with you. I'm Vanessa Arias Tiara. What we know so far about COVID-19 immunity and what it means for vaccine boosters. Since the start of the pandemic, scientists have been seeking to better understand immunity to the novel coronavirus. How long is a person immune after having COVID-19, after getting vaccinated, or both? And what could long-lasting immunity mean for booster shots? It's still too early to tell, but experts are getting closer to cracking the code. The current wisdom around potential coronavirus vaccine boosters suggests they may be needed at some point, but exactly when is unclear. Dr. Peter Marks, director of the U.S. Food and Drug Administration Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research, said on Thursday during a COVID-19 vaccine education and equity project webinar. An expert emphasized anyone who is fully vaccinated currently should still be protected, but the reason why the timeline for potential boosters remains unclear is because scientists still need time to collect the data on how long immunity against COVID-19 may last in the future, and how to factor in future variants. When a person has immunity, in general, that means they have protection against a disease. Active immunity can be acquired either through vaccination or infection. Your immune system develops antibodies either induced by the vaccination or in response to the infection, and either immune response can maintain a memory. Immunity is often measured by the presence of antibodies, proteins made by the immune system to help fight infections in the blood. They can usually be determined with a laboratory test, but immune systems are much more than just antibodies. They involve a host of players, including B cells, which produce antibodies, and T cells, which target infected cells. Research has shown that both antibodies and T cells might even recognize infections from variants of a pathogen, such as the emerging coronavirus variants circulating in the world today, which, despite key differences that may make them spread more easily, have enough similarities to be recognized by the immune system's memory. And even if someone recovered from a previous infection and has a natural immunity, vaccination can help give their immune memory a boost. Vaccine makers monitoring immunity. Currently, 3 coronavirus vaccines are authorized for emergency use in the United States. The 2-dose Pfizer or BioNTech vaccine for age 12 and older, the 2-dose Moderna vaccine for age 18 and older, and the single-dose Johnson & Johnson's vaccine for age 18 and older. All 3 companies are investigating the potential use of boosters. Vaccine makers have been studying whether the immunity these vaccines elicit may wane over long periods of time, say possibly after a year or more, and whether they protect as well against coronavirus variants that could emerge and evolve. If so, a vaccinated person might need a booster dose of vaccine to stay protected against the original coronavirus strain and newly emerging variants, somewhat similar to how a tetanus booster is recommended every 10 years, or different flu vaccines are recommended each year. When it comes to other viruses, one bout of measles usually leaves someone immune for life. The same was true for smallpox before the virus was eradicated in the 1970s by a global vaccination campaign. Proper vaccination against measles and smallpox completely protects against infection. But respiratory viruses such as influenza and coronavirus are trickier. People can catch flu over and over again, and flu vaccines generally provide only partial protection against infection and severe illness. Since there are typically multiple influenza viruses circulating due to mutation, though the coronavirus has a slower mutation rate than influenza. Still, doctors are worried that coronavirus may end up being like influenza, which requires a new vaccine every year both because the circulating strain mutates fast and because immunity from the vaccine wears off quickly. In the case of coronavirus vaccine, several studies have assessed immune response elicited by the Moderna and Pfizer vaccines to the original strain of the virus, compared with variants, and these studies observe modest or no defects in cellular immune recognition of the variants, according to a web page on the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention's website updated Thursday. It is difficult to predict how reduced neutralizing activity may affect COVID-19 vaccines' effectiveness. But across studies, antibody neutralizing activity seen among fully vaccinated people has been generally higher than that observed among people who have recovered from COVID-19. Data from clinical trials suggest that the protections offered by the Pfizer and Moderna coronavirus vaccines likely last at least 9 months. Marks of the FDA said in April, but experts have been at pains to point out that doesn't mean immunity stops at 9 months. It means that the longest volunteers in the trials have been followed to see what their immunity is and collect data. Immunity could last much longer. Researchers just need the time to evaluate. The medical community still needs data to determine to what degree immunity may wane over time. Dr. Amesh Al-Belja, senior scholar at the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security, who has not involved in the studies, told CNN in an email on Thursday. The degree could be measured as whether people who are fully vaccinated eventually have breakthrough infections at a higher rate, or have infections that are severe enough to require hospitalization. Meanwhile, studies into natural immunity from being previously infected with the coronavirus have been ongoing for somewhat longer than vaccine trials. The latest findings on a long-lasting immunity. 2 new studies this week add to the growing body of evidence that suggests natural immunity to the coronavirus after someone recovers from COVID-19 can be long-lasting, possibly at least a year. But that doesn't mean they shouldn't get vaccinated. It also doesn't mean immunity will last forever. One study, published in the journal Nature on Monday, found that immune cells in the bone marrow of people who were infected with coronavirus have a memory of the infection that can be long-lived. The other research, published in the journal A Clinical Medicine on Monday, found that COVID-19 antibodies remain detectable some 10 months after infection among people who had recovered. Bone marrow cells may maintain a memory of COVID-19 for at least 11 months after someone is infected. These cells are an essential source of protective antibodies, according to the new study published in Nature. Research from Washington University in St. Louis examined blood samples from 77 people previously infected with SARS-CoV-2, the virus that caused COVID-19. The research found an initial decrease in the presence of COVID-19's antibody after infection, but between 4 and 11 months the decline slowed. Some people might be recommended to follow a different booster schedule than others in the future if booster shots are eventually needed. As many as 9 in 10 people infected with the coronavirus develop natural immunity against the virus that is sustained with little decay, up to 10 months after their initial infection, suggests the eClinical Medicine study conducted by research at the National Clinical Laboratory LabCorp. The research found that about 90% recovered COVID-19 patients tested in the study had detectable antibodies by 21 days following infection, and antibody rates remain around 90%, given some variability up to 300 days. The research analyzed data on 59,086 people who were confirmed to have COVID-19 between March 2020 and January 2021 and had at least one antibody test performed with LabCorp after testing positive for the coronavirus infection. The data did not include patient demographic information or information about how severe a particular COVID-19 case was. That is the CBA Evening News for this Saturday. Thanks for watching. I'm Vanessa Ariastiara. Have a nice